Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237, coming at you with kind of a random review. And it's not a Hammer film, but it is a British film. In fact, it's of Amicus Productions, which was another big British film company, 60s and 70s. Did a lot of horror films. And this is from 1972, and it is Tales from the Crypt, which of course is in the double pack with the sequel, Vault of Horror. And yeah, it's based on the same comic series with the same name. Has nothing to do with the TV show. This came out in 1972, a good 17 years before the TV show. In fact, it's even more like the comics than the TV show because I am a fan of the comics. This is the only one I have. They're kind of hard to find unless you go online, which I don't shop online, but I love Tales from the Crypt comics. And if you follow my channel, you know I have the complete series of the HBO show. It's a little bit more like it because the Crypt Keeper is like a cloaked, sort of a normal looking guy, cloaked. And it's an anthology story, much like Creepshow, which Creepshow was an homage to Tales from the Crypt and EC Comics in general. And I love anthology horror films. I mean, the first horror film I ever really saw was Creepshow. First DVD I ever got was Creepshow. It's still in my top 10 favorite films of all time. And I just really like, and also just anthology series, Twilight Zone, Tales from the Crypt, Tales from the Dark Side. I have some anthology films like Creepshow, Creepshow 2, Tales of Terror, Evening with Edgar Allan Poe, From a Whisper to a Scream. But I'm looking forward to getting more because I love the concept of anthology horror. You know, you get one movie, but you get 3, 4, or 5 short stories. Short, sweet, to the point. And Tales from the Crypt is one of the better ones. It's not particularly gory, but it's got great stories. In fact, I don't know, well, you can see that's the Crypt Keeper there. This is the first time I've seen Tales from the Crypt because I just picked this up. I've not yet seen Vault of Horror. But, yeah, very underrated. I don't know if, like, you hardly ever hear people talking about these movies. And in fact, I didn't even know there was a Tales from the Crypt movie outside a relation to the show. Because the Tales from the Crypt movies from the 90s, Demon Knight and Bordello of Blood, are just feature-length stories. I didn't know there was a 70s film. And when I found that out, I was like, definitely checking that out. I think it's even on YouTube. But I'm a stickler for physical copies. And so it came out in 1972 by Amicus. It's directed by Freddie Francis, who directed a number of Hammer horror films, a number of ones that I've reviewed already. It stars Joan Collins, Peter Cushing, Roy Dotrice, Patrick McGee, Nigel Patrick, Robin Phillips, Ralph Richardson, Ian Hendry, bunch of people. The Crypt Keeper is played by Sir Ralph Richardson. In fact, only 2 stories are from EC Comics, Tales from the Crypt comic book. Creepy founding editor Russ Jones, producer Milton Subotsky did not own a run of the original EC comic book, but instead adapted the movie from 2 paperback reprints given to him by Russ Jones. The story Wish You Were Here was reprinted in paperback, Collection Vault of Horror, 1965. The other 4 stories in this film were among the 8 stories reprinted in Tales from the Crypt in 1964. So I'm guessing after EC went under, these are all new stories. So I guess once EC went under, they were reprinting them into paperbacks, I guess similar like this, and the stories in this film were the ones that were reprinted. Richardson's Hooded Crypt Keeper, more somber than the EC original, has a monk-like appearance and resembles EC's ghoul lunatics. In the EC horror comics, the other horror hosts, the Old Witch and the Vault Keeper, wore hoods, while the Crypt Keeper did not. Which actually, yeah, that is also true. The Crypt Keeper had long white hair. Screenplay was adapted into a tie-in novel by Jack Olek, Tales from the Crypt. Connections to the TV series, I think it just says what episodes were eventually used in the TV show. Although, well, this goes over the differences really, but I almost held up the comic again. The film, it doesn't really have like a bookend story like say Creep Show does. It has a framing device, whereas in between each story we have these 5 individuals who, for one reason or another, they stop into these catacombs, and there's a tourist group going on, and they get separated. They come across this crypt with the Crypt Keeper, who gives each person a sort of warning, a story about them that they haven't had happen yet. It's like a stories of warning, but they have reason to believe the Crypt Keeper's telling the truth because the story does relate to them in some way. And then we see the stories as they're told. And the first story is All Through the House, which was done into season 1 of the TV show. About a woman killing her husband so she can take her daughter and live with her boyfriend. And the episode ended with the daughter letting the axe-murdering Santa that's been trying to get in the house the whole time into the house. In this one, the killer says naughty or nice. Or in the TV show, he said naughty or nice, rather. But, and of course, the TV show ended with the Crypt Keeper saying the girl was unharmed. But yeah, it was done very similarly. And even though I liked the story, I was kind of tuned out because I had already seen it. I didn't know they were gonna do stories from the comics, so I figured I would have seen some. The next story is Reflection of Death, which is about this guy played by Ian Hendry. He leaves his wife and he leaves his kids to be with this other woman, Susan, played by Angela Grant. And there's this accident. They drive off a cliff together, and he gets out of the wreck and we see sort of his point of view for the rest of the story. Tries hitchhiking back, everyone screams. He goes back to, his wife, but she's already with another guy. She screams. He goes back to his girlfriend, Susan, who's blind from the wreck, and says, you've been dead for 2 years since the accident. And then he sees his reflection, and he's a rotting corpse. And then the twist is he wakes up in the car, and the accident hasn't happened yet, but then it does. So, I mean, the thing about this movie is it still plays on the tales of morality, which I think are the best episodes of both Tales from the Crypt and Twilight Zone. Just bad people sort of get what they deserve, and good twist endings. But I would probably say those are the two weakest of the 5 stories. The next one I liked, this is more Peter Cushing in a very out of place role. I've never seen anything like this. He's kind of a goofball. He's kind of a dirty old man, kind of hobo looking, even though he has a house. He has a bunch of dogs, always has kids over. He loves to entertain kids. But the Elliot family, Robin Phillips is the guy that plays James Elliot. He's the one that's being told the story to. He's the main character. His father, Edward, played by David Markham, they live across the street, and they're yuppies, and they hate Peter Cushing's character because he's poor. Just because I guess he's what's called a dust man, whatever that is. He's always cut. That's probably why he looks like a hobo. They hate him just because he's a filthy, not as rich guy as him. So they just set out to sabotage his life. They call the city to get his dogs taken away. They spread rumors about how he's a child molester, so all the parents stop letting their kids go over. And then, on Valentine's Day, James sends him a number of mean Valentines, signing it from all the neighbors. And it drives Peter Cushing to commit suicide. And then a year later, James is sitting alone, and the old corpse of Peter Cushing comes in. Great makeup, by the way. And, kills him. And then when his dad walks in, there's like a poem says, Happy Valentine's Day. You were mean and cruel from the start. Now you really have no. Then when he opens the thing up, it's his son's still beating heart. That was one of the... That story is really where the movie starts to pick up more. Again, Peter Cushing, a very different character from what I'm used to. I'm used to just really classy, sort of, either sort of anti-heroes like Van Helsing, or heroes like Van Helsing, or evil sociopaths like Baron Frankenstein. This is something I never expected Peter Cushing to play, and he still did a great job. Which, 1972, this was a year after his wife Helen passed, which was a devastating blow to him. He stayed acting to keep his mind off of it. If you want to know more about that, go to my Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell review. But I'm sure this role helped keep his mind busy, because I don't think he ever played anything like this. And then I really liked the next story, because it was actually from Haunt of Fear comic, but it's sort of a loose adaptation or variation of The Monkey's Paw, which is one of my favorite short stories of all time. Which, of course, we all know the story of The Monkey's Paw. There's, in this case, it's a little statuette. But, you know, some sort of relic that will grant you 3 wishes, but there's a consequence with every wish. This one is the most gory, and I like the gore in it. It's probably the most horrific, because, you know, the wife wishes for a lot of money. The way she gets it is her husband dies. She gets it from the insurance money. She wishes for him to come back the way he was right before the accident. Casket gets dropped off at the house. Turns out he didn't die from the accident. He had a heart attack right before it. So then she wishes for him to be fully alive again and to live forever. But when he comes back to life, he's still been embalmed, so he's got that embalming fluid burning through his body. So he's in extreme agony. She tries to kill him, but he's immortal no matter how she cuts him up. The guts look great. And then the last story I really liked as well, Blind Alleys, which has Nigel Patrick as this a military major who goes to this home for blind. They're all elderly, but it's the home for the blind. He's the new director, and he's trying to be cost effective. He's trying to be economically feasible, but he's being extremely stingy. Like, he turns the heat off at night to the point where the patients are getting sick. One even dies from the cold. He serves them not even soup. It's just like broth with no meat or vegetables, and it's made with dishwater. Won't buy any more blankets, you know, just being really cheap. While his German Shepherd that he has, you know, a blanket. He gets steak and wine and everything he wants. The sort of leader, the guy that, you know, speaks on behalf of the blind. He's kind of like Caesar from Planet of the Apes for blind people. He's played by Patrick McGee, who was he was the writer in Clockwork Orange, who got beaten and whose wife got raped. And I really liked Patrick McGee in this. I've only seen him in Dementia 13, this, Clockwork Orange, and The Black Cat. Didn't care for The Black Cat, the Lucio Fulci film. Love Clockwork Orange, but he was over the top in that. Liked him in Dementia 13, but I really liked him in this too. And eventually the blind work together. They get his dog trapped in this room for a few days. They trap him in a room for a few days. And they just built this sort of obstacle course down in the basement. And they wait for the dog to get really hungry. They let both of them out at the same time, but they're trapped. And like, there's this one part they built that just has razor blades all over the walls in this tight passage. So he has to walk through it carefully, but then he has to run away from his starving dog. So, and then of course we get to the finale with the people in the catacombs. The Crypt Keeper tells them that they can leave, and no one remembers why they went to the catacombs. And that's when we find out the twist, which is these are not stories of warnings of what's to come. They're reminders of why they're there. It's like purgatory. And once they go out, they fall into like the pit of hell or whatever. But no, I thought Tales from the Crypt was a good movie. even its weaker stories were still good. Its stronger stories were very good. It just, again, I'm a huge fan of anthology horror. It was like a less gory creep show, but it felt like Tales from the Crypt. Obviously, I recognize the ones from the show, but if you're a fan of anything Tales from the Crypt, comics or the TV show, or even Creep Show, which is very close to it, or just anthology horror in general, definitely definitely check out Tales from the Crypt. It's got a great cast. Even for the people who I did recognize, they all still did a great job. Especially Peter Cushing and Patrick McGee in their stories. But keep in mind, it's from 1972, so you're not going to get the HBO Crypt Keeper. It doesn't have that kind of humor. At least for the most part, it doesn't. And I'm pretty sure you can find it on YouTube. I think I started watching it one night when I was supposed to be doing ho-ho horror, and I just ended up watching something else. But then this, which is even sometimes called Tales from the Crypt 2, or more Tales from the Crypt, it acts as a sequel, another anthology film, which I'll get to at some point. But yeah, Tales from the Crypt, I really enjoyed this movie, so thank you for watching.